So we're happy to pick up the afternoon on Fano Variety.
Okay, cheers. So a little recap for my benefit from yours. What are we trying to do? So we have a Fano variety, and well, most of the time they're manifolds, but then we're going to relax that a bit. So we have a Fano variety. And the point is, these are of fundamental importance in algebraic geometry, and yet we do not know their classification. And we want to try and classify it. There's been good attempts in the past, but they're not generalizing very well to higher dimensions. So we're taking a leaf out of mirror symmetry. So associated to this is integer sequence called the quantum field. So this is great because it's just a sequence of integers. This is exactly the sort of thing that we want for machine learning. Okay, but the problem is that it's really very hard to calculate, and also perhaps not so useful because we don't know the classification of Fano varieties at the moment. You know, so how can we go away and calculate them? So mirror symmetry says, just 1 second, try and find yourself a Laurent polynomial F. Okay, and associated with this is a power series called the classical period sequence. And this is really easy to calculate. So all we do is we take successive powers of F, we extract the constant coefficient, and this is what the AKs are. And mirror symmetry says, look, sometimes you're going to be lucky, these two things are going to be exactly the same. And so when they're exactly the same, this is called a mirror, and the idea is this is combinatorial, this is hard and we don't know. Well, maybe we can find a way of describing the correct Laurent polynomials to be looking at, and through this, extract the classification of Fano varieties in all dimensions. Okay, good. But still, this is a little bit too hard because we don't actually know what the right Laurent polynomials are. And so instead, what we do is we simplify things further. We look at the Newton polytope of F, and for reasons, this will give rise to a toric variety. And we like toric varieties because they're much easier to handle than general algebraic varieties. Okay, and so I hope actually is, look, what we really want to do is we want to find the right family of polytopes to be thinking about. Maybe we can find some ansatz for putting coefficients on them. This will give us our mirrors, and then this will give us this, and then this way we'll begin to see the landscape of Fano varieties for the first time. Okay, so roughly speaking, that's what we got up to. And what I said was, well, an interesting place to look is amongst the reflexive polytopes. Okay? Well, you're all familiar with reflexive polytopes, so I probably don't need to tell you what they are, but just in case, it's a lattice polytope P. It contains the origin in its interior, and the dual polytope is also a lattice polytope. And these have been classified up to and including dimension 4. The 4-dimensional case is the very famous Kreutzer-Skarke classification of 500 million polytopes, which are used for the partial classification of Calabi Yau prefolds. Okay, good. So that's where we are. And I said, this has worked really well. So let's just look in dimension 2. Recall that there are 10 smooth Del-Petzl surfaces. Okay, so how could we recover them using this technique? Well, we'll focus, like I said, on the reflexive polytopes. So let's just begin with what we already know. So yesterday, we saw that the A mirror for P2 was x plus y plus 1 over xy. And when we passed it Newton polytope, what we recovered was this Fano polytope. And I said, well, this was no surprise, because if we take the fan over this, if you remember from yesterday, hit the fan over this, and this actually is P2 as a toric variety. Okay. And how did we make the Laurent polynomial from this? We simply assign coefficient 1 to each of the vertices. And when you assign coefficient 1, you're going to get x plus y plus 1 over xy. Okay, so what else can we do? Well, this is toric geometry now, and the wonderful thing is we can explain a lot of geometric concepts purely combinatorially. Remember, each of these columns, each one of these is an affine patch. I'm going to take this smooth affine patch here, and I'm going to do a blow-up. And what happens in the world of toric geometry as well? The other two patches are unchanged, and this patch basically splits into two patches. So in essence, I've done a blow-up here. Okay, so this looks good. It's still a smooth toric Fano variety. In fact, this is F1, the Hertzsprung surface, and I put coefficients 1, 1, 1, 1, and I get the mirror for F1. So I've so far found mirrors for 2 of the 10 smooth delpexels, but it's kind of a bit of a cheat, because so far they've both actually just been toric varieties in their own right. So I can continue this game. So I'm going to do another blow up. I'm going to choose one of the other smooth charts. So say I choose this one, and I'm going to get something that looks like this now. Okay, and this is the blow up of P2. And 2 points, I don't think it's really got any special name. Again, I put 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and this is a mirror for the blow up of P2 at 2 points. We saw P1 plus P1. So this was P1 plus P1. Again, stick 1 to all of the vertices. So here we have P1 plus P1, and its mirror is just the obvious Laurent polynomial. Okay, and then just one more. I'm going to do another blow up, and I'm going to get PP6. Again, the Laurent polynomial is just stick 1 all vertices. Okay, good. So I've got 5 of the 10 delpexel surfaces. I've constructed the wrong mirror in each case. And this was a complete cheat, because all 5 of them were just toric varieties to begin with. Okay, but let's carry on, okay? So the remaining 5 delpexels are not toric varieties, but I can still carry on blowing up and see what happens. And so I'm just going to take a step detour down. Now it begins to get more interesting. More interesting is kind of draw it. I don't know why I'm blurring so much. I want to get my origin going in. Nice. See what I'm going to do. Okay, so I've just done another blow up here, but now if you know anything about toric geometry, you'll see that this is no longer smooth. Okay, so it actually has 2 singular charts. In fact, it's got 2 times 1 singularities. Okay, that doesn't matter. You know, these toric varieties, they're not the Fano varieties that we're trying to think about. They just happen to be nice combinatorial models to work with, okay? So although we're trying to find mirrors for smooth things, the fact that this term writing as singularities, it's kind of irrelevant, okay? And now though it's less obvious what coefficients to put on to recover a Laurent polynomial. Well, ones at the vertices is always a good start. And the magic ansatz in this case is you want to put binomial coefficients on the edges. So you do that, and you're going to get yourself Laurent mirror for, I don't know, physicists, I get confused. Some people, this is the anticanonical degree. Some people, it's 12 minus the anticanonical degree. This is why this is the only one I wrote up, because 6 and 12 minus 6 are the same. And I go out on a them, and I'm going to write dp 7 here. Would you be happier if I wrote dp5? I'll write dp5. Okay, it doesn't matter. So this is another one, okay? And the interesting thing is this wasn't a smooth, but it's still a reflexive polytope. And I can carry on playing this game again. Okay. Let me get this in the right place. Okay, I'm going to blow up here. This has got really quite a few singularities now. It's got 2 half singularities, and then I guess it's a third one too. No, yeah, maybe a third one. Doesn't really matter. Okay, it's got a big singularity along here, or whatever that is. And again, binomial coefficients is the ansatz that works. So these are the coefficients of the Laurent polynomial mirror. And I'm going to do this exactly one more time and stop. And those of you who are good at maths will realize that I've not got 10 things on the board. Okay, but that's okay. So 1, 3, 3, 1. Okay, good. So this has given me Laurent polynomials mirrors for 8 of the 10. Okay, and actually there was a lot of freedom. So maybe you remember that in 2 dimensions there's 16 reflexive polygons. And actually there's a huge amount of redundancy. You could have played this game with all 16, and you'd have found that actually you're often getting just the same mirror. Yeah, so you're getting a mirror for the same delta surface coming up again. Okay, mirrors are not unique. What we think is unique is the period sequence. Binomial coefficients, that's all. It's an ansatz. So you look at the length of the edge, you just write down the binomial coefficients of appropriate length. It's just, there's no explicit, I'm just presumably not explaining myself very well. You know, if you do just the binomial expansion of 1 minus x to the n, yeah.
But you have 2 variables, right? You have an x and an y.
Sorry?
You have 2 variables here, right?
Okay. Just think about plus or minus. Just think about this, okay? And then you get a whole bunch of binomial coefficients coming out, and those are just the numbers to then write along each edge, etc., etc. Okay, so the length of the edge is just appropriate binomial coefficients.
Okay, so if you have 4 in a row, you do 1, 1, 1, 3, 3, 1, or
yeah, right. So if the next one, the next one would be exactly what you said. I think the 1, 4, 6, 4, 1.
You look at all the edges, and then you see how many. I mean, the vertices will always be 1s.
Yeah, always 1s.
And then you see what the length of the edge is, and then you fill this in.
So actually, there is now some actual justification for this. Okay, in terms of understanding these singularities and this concept called mutation. I don't want to go into that here. But for the longest time, this was just an ansatz. So it was first, this idea of putting ones at the vertices, this is due to Victor Visual-Cost. And he basically, it's a mathematical truth. It comes from the Govertel-Horry-Raffer method I mentioned in the last talk. And this idea of generalizing it to put binomial coefficients on the edges, this is due to Sergei Galkin. But it wasn't a mathematical theorem. Now it is modulo whole parallel conjectures. Okay, so now it's a bit more grounded in maths. And it's to do with deformations of singularities. These are the sort of singularities, the set of singularities.
But you say that these numbers also count certain singularities?
Sorry?
You said you're saying that these numbers, they also count certain singularities?
No, not as such. These numbers are really coming, they're really coming from the fact that, So here, this is a affine chart, but it's very singular. Okay, so it's probably something like a third 1-2 singularity and a logic essential. Okay, now there is a conjecture which makes a lot of sense, which basically says, look, this mirror corresponds to some smooth Delpexel surface. Okay, and there's a degeneration of that smooth Delpexel surface to this singular toric variety. Okay, and so in fact, under deformation, these singularities, they smooth away. Okay, and in 2 dimensions, we're really lucky because Collar and Maury, I think, classified the smoothable surface singularities. Okay, and they're what are called T singularities. Okay, and they're the only sort of singularities that you can see in these pictures. Okay, and basically because of the way these singularities have to behave in the deformation, skipping a lot of steps, it's a justification for where these coefficients come from. It really is something like we have to be able to take a line segment of length 1 and sort of increase its power to get this. Okay, so I can send you a paper that explains as well.
It's also the number of perfect matches that you were talking about.
Right, it is, in this case. That's right. So there's a beautiful reinterpretation of all of this in terms of quivers and diagonal models. And the really nice thing here, though, is this generalizes, once you understand the geometry, beyond reflexive polytopes. So it generalizes beyond diagonal models.
I didn't know the connection of this.
Unfortunately, none of this is understood in higher dimensions. So, yeah. But yeah, okay, so to come back to this, reflexive polytopes are a really good place to look, and we found there is 8 of the 10 Delpexels there. There's 2 missing. And you may say, well, that's not very convincing. But actually, the 2 that are missing are the Delpexel surfaces that are not very ample. They're just ample. Okay? And these toric generations that are coming from reflexive polytopes, so these are all very ample toric varieties. And it would be impossible to get something that is ample degenerated to something that's very ample. So we would never see mirrors in this situation. Okay? So looking in the world of reflexive polytopes is great, but you're only ever going to see the very ample Fano varieties, the very ample Delpexel surfaces. And in fact, you have to move to the bigger world of all possible Fano varieties to find the missing 2 people, but you can find them. I'm not going to write them up because they've got a lot of lattice points, and I don't even know what the coefficients are supposed to be. I mean, I do know them at the moment. Okay, so we can find all 10. This approach is only going to find 8 of them, but it's really quite wonderful because the common occurrence of reflexive polytopes is telling us exactly which ones we're going to find through this technique. Okay, and so in mathematical theorem, so this is due to Benjamin Nell and Thomas Prince. the cell. Basically, in the space of all Fano polygons, you're going to have to excuse a little bit of hand waving here. I'm going to say there are exactly 10 mirrors, or 10 good mirrors, and these correspond exactly to the 10 smooth pencils. Okay? So this procedure in surfaces works really well, but there's a lot of maths that we already know, and so it's working well, basically, in a provable sense, and it's very satisfying. So what about if we look in dimension 3? Okay. So if you remember in dimension 3, there's 105 smooth Fanos. And maybe we want to look amongst the reflexive polytopes of mirrors. Now, Kreuzer and Scarfi classified the three-dimensional reflexive polytopes as just over 4,000. We're going to look amongst these 4,000 for mirrors. But before we even do that, remember, the reflexive polytopes, they're Gorenstein toric varieties, so they're very ample. So we will only ever find mirrors for the very ample Fanos. How many of those?
What do you mean by technical mirrors? I mean, so there are 16 reflective polygons.
But most,
some
yeah.
of them give rise to the same.
Yeah. Maybe rather than say mirrors, I should say period sequences. There are, in fact, an infinite number of mirrors for any of the deltas, but yeah, they fall into 10 equivalent. So yeah, if we're going to look amongst some of the reflection ones, we should only find very ample Fanos, and there are exactly 98. So let's see how many period sequences, good period sequences, we can find amongst the reflexive polytopes, where, you know, so this is due to Coates, Corti, Galkin. So we find that amongst, so this one is less, this is more experimental, it's less founded on mathematics, just because we don't really have the knowledge that we need about high dimensional singularities. But amongst the approximately 4,000 reflective polytopes, okay, we find exactly 98 good periods. And through a lot of hard work, you can actually show that these correspond to the 98 smooth Fanos with very ample minus. Okay, so this is slightly more experimental because, you know, why are you restricting to just reflexives? There's no particularly strong reason for that. The reason why we restrict to reflexives is because that's about all we've got. Okay? And then you can say, well, okay, this is great. You already need a classification in dimension 2 and 3, so it's nice justification of this approach. What about doing something new? What about dimension? Well, unfortunately, you know, we're still building on a tower of conjectures. There's a lot of stuff to be proven. So we wouldn't even know when we reach the end of the classification. But what I can do is say something like that, you know, we can do this search. We have an idea of what to be looking for. So prior to our work, there was around a couple of hundred four-dimensional smooth Fanos now. And using this, we find about 700 new smooth bounds. Okay, I don't make any claims that this is complete. I suspect it's sort of ballpark about the row.
In the dimension 3 case, you can have facets that contain points.
Yes.
How do you assign these numbers then?
Good. So at the time of this paper, it was just another algorithm. So it was based on ideas from Carl Sagan's theory of deformation to singularity. And he has a beautiful way of understanding in 3 dimensions when you have smoothing of singularities in certain settings involving constant factorization. And essentially what we did was we translated that onto the polytope. And so we said, you know, we need to pass factorization. And when we do, stop. Factorization goes from Minkowski summation total multiplication of polynomial. That tells us exactly what. So now actually we've got a much deeper understanding. We have we can rephrase all of that work in terms of what's called rigid maximum useful. But that is a dimension agnostic and polytope agnostic. In other words, the fact that they were doing that, and we can reproduce all of it.
Also, I wanted to ask, the ones that have just ample anticanonical bundle, what's the situation?
Yeah, no, we have mirrors for those too. I just don't know them off the top of my head. So you would never find the mirrors when you're looking at the reflectors. You have to be that side of it, but we do have mirrors.
You just can't package the information into a polytope, right?
Sorry?
So is the statement that you can't package that information about the polynomial into a polytope?
Yeah, so using this language of deformation inspired by Carl Sagan's work, we couldn't handle those cases, but now we can, using this idea of maximal mutability, which I'm not going to go into, okay? But that lets us just pick any kind of polynomial that find a way of determining if it's good, and if we can put some coefficients on it. And when you do that, you find these. You're just living outside of the world. But I sort of want to come to that now because, in essence, you both put your finger on the key problem, which is how do you put coefficients on a polytope to turn it back into a Laurent polynomial? Okay. Well, there's one case in which there's no ambiguity, and that's if there were only the vertices. Okay. So. There's a wonderful way of viewing that in geometry. So we take P to be a polytope, to be a Fano polytope. We have that the toric variety XP has what are called terminal singularities. If and only if, when we intersect our polytope with the lattice, what we see is just the origin and the vertices of the polytope. Okay? So all we have is just the polytope sitting in the lattice, we've just got its vertices in the origin. And these correspond to what are called terminal toric varieties. Terminal singularities are very mild but unavoidable singularities in algebraic geometry. Okay? And in this case, there's no question about what mirror to pick. So when this is the case, you simply take f to be the Laurent polynomial given by x to the VR, x to the v for all v in the vertices. Okay. So there's just no choice. Okay. So this is just a perfectly valid mirror, and as soon as you accept this, you realize that actually, all the way through yesterday and today, I've been only talking about smooth panels. But as soon as you accept this, you realize smoothness has got nothing to do with anything. It's just a sort of historical obsession, okay? In fact, this means that we shouldn't be worried about smooth. The correct category to think about, or the correct class for this flavor of mirror symmetry is terminal factorial. Right. So this includes smooth Fano varieties, but it's slightly bigger. And if you know the minimal model program, the justification I gave at the beginning for why we might care about Fano varieties at all, well, I said, the minimal model program breaks algebraic varieties down into something simple. I said the Fano varieties are slightly, hedging my bets. What they actually are terminal key factorial Fano varieties. Okay, so this is just brilliant. This is so much better. Okay, and it's not that we expected this. You just, you work through this sequence of arguments that we've done together over the last lecture and the first half of this one, and you just have to come to this conclusion. Okay, this is not a mirror symmetry for Fano manifolds. It's a mirror symmetry for terminal Q factorial Fano varieties. That's a big win. Okay. Now, you thought we didn't know much about Fano manifolds. We know even less about terminal Q factorial Fanos, okay? We don't even know the classification in 3 dimensions. So this is really fascinating. And anything that we find is going to be really, really interesting. The problem is how we're going to start building examples when we don't know their classification. How we're going to start exploring the standard scale when nothing is known. Okay. Well, we just begin with what we can begin with. We begin with looking at the terminal toric Fano varieties, because at least they have a very straightforward combinatorial description. And the simplest of those are weighted projective space, which we've already seen. So let me just remind you of the definition of weighted projective space. So exactly the same as projective space, we have C to the n plus 1, knock out the origin, and out of an equivalence relation where we have the x0, xn twiddles. Well, before it was just lambda x0, lambda xn, lambda in C star, but we just added a little bit of weighting to each of these. So we allow each of these lambdas now to be weighted differently. We have the W0, Wn. This is a sequence of strictly positive integers, such that if you remove any one of those integers, the GCD is 0. Okay. So this is a weighted projective space, and we denote it by the W0 to W1, and we call the Wi the weights. And if I set W0 equal W1 equal Wn equal to 1, I just look at the projective space. Okay. So these have a really nice phrasing in terms of polytopes, So we have P is a lattice simplex. So its vertices are V0, Vn, okay, such that W0, V0 plus dot 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 plus W and Vn is equal to 0. Okay, so the weights become the barycentric coordinate of the origin within this simplex. Okay, and just one more technical condition for all the GIT fans out there, and we also need, but this is technical and you can just immediately forget it if you want, we need that the VIs generate the lattice that we're working in. Like I said, you can instantly forget. So these are very easy to understand as toric varieties. We're just looking at lattice simplices containing the origin. And from what I've just said there, if we want them to be terminal, these are lattice simplices containing the origin and no other lattice points apart from the vertices. Okay. So you can go away and generate hundreds and thousands of examples. Okay, it takes a few centuries, but you can do it. Okay. Using something like a HPC, you can compute. You know, I actually know how many we computed. Well, a lie, but no, I do. We can compute, for example, 150,000 examples in a range of dimensions from 1 all the way up to 10. Okay. So this is 150,000 terminal weighted projection sequences. Easy, moderately easy. Not mathematically challenging. And in every single one of these cases, there's no ambiguity about what the Laurent polynomial is. The Laurent polynomial mirror is just this. So you can compute the period sequence in every single case. And so the upshot of this is we have 150,000 examples. I think that example has gone so wrong. I'm going to have to try again. 150,000 examples of period sequences. Okay. Well, that's fantastic. Period sequences is a sequence of numbers, so let's start machine learning with them and see what we can find out. Is there any structure to this? For example, can we determine the dimension? That would be a good start, right? If you just give me a period sequence and I don't know what x is, can I determine what its dimension is? Because we think that the period sequence is completely characterizing, up at the very top, the period sequence is supposed to be completely characterizing a variety x. So better be able to at least tell you what its dimension is. Okay. Good. If you just know the period sequence, you've sort of thrown away all this information. You just have the period sequence. I mean, a really fascinating and incredibly challenging question is if I have the period sequence, can I construct a Laurent polynomial that realizes that? That's way beyond what you can conceive of asking, but that would be wonderful. It's clearly a machine learning question. But yeah, you've thrown everything away in your mind. You really just only got the sequence of integers. Can you reconstruct? What can you reconstruct about x? Can I find its dimension? That's obvious, easy thing. And you look around and support vector machines and stuff like that, and it looks like it's going to work. Okay. I want to emphasize to you how hard all of this. In terms of geometry, You know, Fano varieties are really hard to understand. Their classification, nobody knows. There's been 2 fields medals awarded for work in this area. Okay? And we know, of course, that algebraic geometry. Okay. So this is a very, 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 very hard question. All of the information is supposedly encoded in this period sequence. So this is a very simple object. Lots of information. Well, early on in the pandemic, I had a wonderful postdoc. He wasn't an algebraic geometry, so he didn't have really statistical issues. He wasn't even a pure mathematician, God help him. He was an applied mathematician, and he desperately needed some figures. I was ill with COVID, and my collaborator, his partner, was ill with COVID. And so we had not this data set, but a very similar data set. And he did something absolutely abominable. He applied PCA to it. Okay. And there is no way you can reduce the dimension of this effectively because it's so simple. And PCA said, reduce to 2 dimensions. And the amazing thing is, reduce to 2 dimensions, regardless of what the dimension of that is only really carrying God of PCA. I mean, obviously, the detail does matter. But, you know, PCA basically says, look, there's only 2 bits of information contained in this period sequence. If you know that, you're good to go. My magic thing. But it turns out to be true. Okay. So we're just all completely stupid. And I think, you know, it's a good lesson, actually. I don't know anything about data science, but I don't think any algorithm can use data science to be doing this because it goes against all of our prior conceptions about how to work. And it takes someone who hasn't got this sort of bigotry to try something like that and believe the result, you know, just okay. Okay. So, well, again, not being a data science issue, reduced it to 2 dimensions. It's going to be something like solving this, you know, infinite sequence of integers, right? And in fact, that's it. You can prove that up to an affine change of coordinates. That's what's going on. So after a little bit of investigating, what PCA says to us is, well, you've got g hat x, and I'm going to write it as a sequence A0, A1. It's an infinite sequence of integers. Now, some of these are 0. Just don't worry about that. Just ignore the ones at 0. Take log of this because it, roughly speaking, grows exponentially. So I'm just going to write the horrible abuse of notation. Log of the period. This is just going to be log of AI, whenever it makes sense to take log. Okay, and then go away and calculate linear regression. On this thing, okay? So this is going to give me slope and offset, slope and intercept. And this is what PCA is finding in every dimension. It doesn't matter what dimension you're working in. These are the 2 key things. Okay, and this is just astonishing. I mean, it just shouldn't be the case. We can't tell you how astonishing it is. But so once you know that, at least you have a way of taking this 150,000 examples and making a plot of them. Because, thank goodness, this is 2-dimensional. So now every period sequence is just a little pair of points. And so you can plot, I forget which way around this should be. It doesn't really matter. You have slope here, intercept here. And a final variety, you pass to its Gromov-Witten regularized quantum period. You take log of it, you take linear regression. So a final variety is a point. So from now on, A point represents a Fano variety. More technically correct, it represents an entire definition of the one's class of Fano varieties. And you do that for those, and I'm not going to get enough points on the board. That'll do it. Okay. What you find is, you know, P10 sits here, P9 sits here, P8 sits here, etc., all the way up to whatever that'll be, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, here. Okay. And then these other terminal weighted projector spaces are sort of sitting. Of course, there's more of them as each dimension goes up. So they sort of just sit like this. Okay. I mean, you know, this is the first time anyone's ever seen the structure of terminal weighted projector spaces, the most simple objects. Because before they were just a collection of weights. And there was no rhyme or reason to those weights. They're just what they were. There's a number theoretic argument that you can make about the weights, but you know, it doesn't mean anything. There's certainly, you know, there's no concept of like being next to each other. And you make this elaborate dance and you end up with them forming these discrete components. You know, that is crazy. Okay. And you don't need me to tell you that a random forest classifier to get this can recover the dimension with 100% accuracy. Okay, you know they really are beautifully precise. So in our problem session or whatever it's called on Friday, the tutorial session, Sarah is going to share some of this data with you, and hopefully you'll recover something roughly like this. It's absolutely astonishing. Even more astonishing. So draw these as sort of blobs, but actually the blobs have structure. So if you look at one of these blobs, absolutely adorable, looks like a hedgehog. Looks something like this. And the nose of your hedgehog is e to the f. Yeah. Yeah, just as a hell of a lot of them. Yeah, so many of them. Yeah. So, there's not many in that dimension. Well, dimension 2 is 1, dimension 3 is 7. Dimension 4, you're getting up to a few hundred, but then by the time you get to dimension 5, you know, we're talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. So yeah, okay, you know, I need to do a lot of dots, but they're pretty dense. When the slides go onto the web page, I'll include the proper plots, and you'll see these are, you know, they're solid, massive colors at the resolution in which they're drawn. And this is fascinating. And you know, if you could encode or understand the boundary of your hedgehog, then you'd begin to understand when to stop looking for terminal weighted space. There is a theoretical bound, but the theoretical bound is way, way, way out, completely wrong. Very far from being shown. You know, but the hedgehog doesn't lie. So if you could understand the boundary of your hedgehog, you'd be able to produce a complete classification very efficiently of terminal weighted projector space. It gets slightly less dense towards its bottom, which is probably for the best. Okay, so yeah, I don't know if that's just because of a slight sampling issue, or if it's just because as you start to get out here, I was just chatting with Sarah, one of the things we've not done, for example, is see what happens as you increase the sort of singularities that you allow. I'm not quite sure how to do that, but you know, it might just be that as you start moving around here, canonical people are creeping in or log term or something, so that might be why it becomes a bit fuzzy or not. But yeah, it's pretty solid all the way through to the next. Yeah. Good. Don't want to run out of time. So that's brilliant. 100% accuracy. What a triumph for machine learning. Or what a triumph for week 1 of first year undergraduate data science, if only we knew. Okay. So yeah, now you go, okay. Well, that was easy. So what if I try the next step? So the next step is you don't look at weighted projective spaces. You look at rank 2 Q factorial terminal toric Fano varieties. Okay, that's a mouthful, but next thing is we can rank 2. So again, we limit ourselves to the toric world because we have to somehow generate some data. And so whereas before we were looking at simplices, now we're looking at P with it had n plus 1 vertices because it was a simplex. Here it has n plus 2 vertices. Okay? So just the next step along in complexity. So you can just go away and generate thousands and thousands and thousands of lattice polytopes with n plus 2 vertices. You find the ones at terminal, a lattice point count problem, and you play the exact same game. This PCA thing didn't have anything to do with it being a weighted projective space. And you get similarly great results. Not quite as incredible looking, but essentially you get blobs of dimensions coming down. The dimensions start to overlap, but you know the overlap isn't. It looks worse in the plot than it really is. It's one of those things where there's a few points that are overlapping and it begins to look worse. And so in this case, it does make sense to ask if, I mean, that's not generalization, it's already incredible. But, you know, it makes sense to ask if machine learning can make sense of this. So random forest classifier, this is recovered the dimension with, I think it was 89% accuracy, which is already incredible, just from knowing the slope and intercept. Linear regression, period sequence of a Fano variety. But you can also do a neural network. And I think it was a very simple thing that we did with just 3 hidden layers, not a huge number of neurons. And this got 98%. Yeah, that's not very surprising, given what the picture looks like, but it's still satisfying. It's over wear of time. But that's all really good. And it's kind of what you'd hope. I mean, you know, we hope that the period sequence encodes everything there is about the Fano variety. So you'd hope that machine learning techniques would be really good. We don't know how to do this as mathematicians.
In this case, the explained variance for the PCA for the first 2 components is still 100%?
Yeah, pretty much. I can't remember exactly what it is. I mean, it's
So you think that still it should just be the slope, and you think it should still just be the slope and the intercept?
The problem is not that the slope and offset is the wrong thing. It's one thing that has a very accurate. But that seems to be.
How deep into the sequence do you? Did that change the?
So it's quite experimental. Begin with those period sequences. Period sequences seem to have, this is what Sarah's looked at, but I don't know if I can show the results. They sort of have a lot of periodic oscillations within them, and this is encoding the GIT size graph. And this is how we'll all be weighted be able to. So early on, because of local explosion, you know, this sort of periodicity is dominates the game. So experimentally, I think we tried quite a way to 100 terms. So So how many terms of the period sequence at the beginning? We just throw away. Yeah. And then we use, I think we managed to get the order of when you did that, you got really accurate error estimates. So the first time you try and do a plot like this, actually, you're probably not going to get such a good image because you didn't bother keeping track of what the error estimates were when you did your linear regression. But as soon as you go back and do that, you'll realize that actually, you know, you just had a bunch of noise and it tidies itself. Yeah, I don't want to run out of time because I just want to tell you the really nice thing that followed on. So yeah, I was a bit late because I sort of pretended that this was easy to do, and it's not. Okay, it's actually a very expensive computation. You're trying to find a whole bunch of lattice polytopes with n+2 vertices that don't have any other lattice points inside them. Well, obviously, most of the time that doesn't work, and you know, and how you're going to do this anyway. And even when you've got an example, if you're in 10 dimensions, that's a heck of a lot of checks that has to take place. So, you know, actually, this is very computationally expensive. But when we did the weighted projective space test, again, I glossed over it. The weights were our friends, and there's a mathematical way of asking the question: is it determinate in terms of the weights? We don't have that in Picard rank 2. But when you don't have something, it seems to be that what you do is you rephrase it as a machine learning problem, and you know, magic happens. And so, but in the Picard rank 2 case, the next step was to rephrase it as a GIT problem. So it's actually really very, very simple to explain, especially because it's still on the black box. Weighted projective space, you've got a single weight, and the condition is that the vertices, you know, when you multiply them by the weights, they sum to 0. In the Picard rank 2 case, what you have V1, Vn plus 2 are the vertices, and there exists weights. I call them W's. Okay. So W1, Wn plus 2, and W prime 1, W prime n plus 2, such that the sum of the Wi, Vi is 0, and the sum of the Wi prime Vi is 0. Okay, so this is a GIT reformulation of this toric variety. There's some, I heard there was this issue about GCDs. There's a technical issue here about well-formedness. It really doesn't matter. It's just a little number theoretic thing that you have to check. Okay, but the point is that we can encode X as a matrix, W1, Wn plus 2, W1 prime, Wn plus 2. Okay, and some of these matrices will give rise to a terminal toric Fano variety, and some of these matrices won't. But we don't know which. We have no idea. And actually, no mathematician has any idea how you do this. If you ask any toric geometer, they'll say, well, okay, it's not so bad. You take this weight matrix and you reverse the process, you recover the polytope, and then you do a point search of the polytope. Completely the wrong answer. We don't want that. Thank you. Okay. But instead, feed this into a neural network. So we asked the neural network. Oh, I'm going to overrun by 2 minutes. So we asked when this weight matrix gives terminal toric Fano variety X, and a neural network was able to give the correct answer 95% of the time. So clearly hinting at some bit of mathematics. But the really fantastic thing now is we were hindered here by just the difficulty of this calculation, but now this is an incredibly fast calculation. Okay, we're going to get the wrong answer 5% of the time, but we don't really care. So now we can use this neural network to generate a huge data set for us. Okay, there's going to be a certain amount of error in it, but that really, it's small. We don't care. And you can use this neural network to generate a sort of partial classification of rank 2 terminal toric Fano varieties in dimension 8. Okay, and you generate billions of points, quite literally, slightly embarrassingly, and it's something that you'd never be able to do without the machine. And you find them sitting, again, the actual pictures I'll include in my slides, but this isn't a lie. They're sort of living in this nice region of space, a little bit fuzzy on this edge, but just like our hedgehogs were a bit fuzzy. But the structure within this, so essentially, this is stratified by Fano index. In this direction, and it's stratified by anticanonical degree in this direction. Okay. So there's a huge amount of information here in these plots of the landscape that machine learning is exposing. How you prove any of this, I have zero idea, but that's okay. And there's no way that we could have found any of this without PCA. Okay, but also very simple rudimentary neural networks, random forests, and so on. They're all exposing this beautiful structure. So yeah, that's the end. I just wanted to say, it's incredible. It all looks a little unserious because, well, it's just a two-dimensional plot, but the fact that it's a two-dimensional plot is ridiculous. You would never have known this. Okay. All right.
I've seen mention of these like smooth Fano polytopes in the literature, and the classification numbers don't align with what you've written. So I think in dimension 2 there was like 5, and dimension 3 there's 18. How did these relate to the classification you're doing?
So 5 and that one. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're the 5 smooth. But the keyword is that they're atomic. So there's 10 nil peptides, which we have 5
Okay.
And so then if you look in 3 dimensions with 105 final of these 8. So part of the it's something that people can get very used with this very similar techniques that we're taking final varieties that are not necessarily final and generating them to toric varieties at the cost of acquiring not too crazy, but singularities.
The 18 in dimension 3 could be like kind of equivalence classes of 100.
Yeah, so there's 18 in dimension 3. There's very efficient algorithm Obrel that he did in his PhD thesis that actually classify them in all dimension basically. But it's a polytope calculation. So hands on this. And it's a lovely mystery. So the number increases by factor 10 in each dimension. 3D. I don't know. Why would we do that?
You mentioned the minimal model program, and it basically says that varieties can be linked to each other by rational transformations and eventually linked to minimal varieties. Do you know what happens to the period series under birational transformations? And if
no. So it's such a lovely question. It's just too hard. So you start with variety. You've got, say, we just picked the polynomial America. and then you do a follow-up of your variety. What would be the new mirror? Can I construct that? Yeah, I just did that. And so
I was going to ask if the clustering could be related to that. Yeah.
Sheffield, Christina and
Yes.
yes, anyway.
Tom Bridgeland.
No, not Tom Bridgeland. Andrea reading. That's something that Andrea and Christina were both thinking about. And you sort of whole theory is through rational operation, so particular forms. Wow. Because it's really tempting, you look at things like this where you've got your polynomial mirror and you do a blow up of the toric variety, you're just sort of adding in one new monomial and you think, how could this be, right? But 2 dimensions.
Okay, yeah, so now we have the poster session. You know where you find the posters. Please have a look at them. The people who are presenting them will be there to discuss the posters. There's also a prize for the people who are presenting posters, so feel free to take a book from those that are on the table. It's a gift from the publisher. So we meet again at 4 o'clock in the Lee Simpkins seminar room for the panel discussion.